I remember, Shira, you guys are from there's different career groups. So you guys are in Northern Virginia, correct?
We are, yes. So I'm going to.
So you know Robert Brandow.
Exactly. That's right. From Career Confidence. Yeah.
And the Essential Career somebody?
Essential Career Network Ministry is probably what it is.
That's what I meant.
Okay. So I'm going to formally open up this call. So welcome everyone to Higher Moment Mastermind. I am Shira Lotzar. Happy to be your host today. Joined by, as always, Vern Schellinger, my colleague here, and we are here to answer your job search questions. And so this is an open Q&A. Oh, and actually we are being joined right now also by another colleague, Alki Thompson. Alki is a recruiter as well. And so the three of us are going to be here to answer your job search questions. All right. So who has a question they would like to kick us off with?
Can I start? I have a question for you, Shira.
Sure.
Can you guys tell us what you guys recruit for? Because that would make things, I guess, more simple or easier.
Okay, so we're happy to do that. Just so you know, today's call is really just about your job search in general. We're not.
Like, it's kind of helpful where you guys are coming from, because if you're like, let's say you're an IT recruiter, hypothetically speaking, and I'm a communication person, that can be valuable if you get what I'm saying.
Understood. So I am a recruiter. I'm a career coach, but as a recruiter, I recruit for associations, membership organizations. Vern doesn't do recruiting anymore. He's used to be an HR executive. Now he's a career coach. And then Alki, do you want to just share, I know you do a variety of searches for all kinds of different industries. Do you want to just give a snippet of your expertise?
Sure. Good morning. I didn't get the question, but
what kind of recruiter are you? Like, who do you recruit for? Your specialties. So whether there's industry vertical, career verticals.
Sure. Nonprofits, manufacturing, sales, admin, a little bit of everything. Not as much IT as I used to.
You're more of a generalist. Yeah. And some recruiters recruit for all kinds of things, and some of us specialize in certain fields or certain professions.
Sure. Can I say why I asked that? Because if, let's say, I have a specific question for you, since you're associations and I'm trying to break into a field and you guys have never dealt with the field, it's kind of easier for us to know if to ask certain questions if they're field related questions.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're welcome to ask a field related question. We'll let you know if we have expertise. So for example, none of us have background with federal, at least that I know of, that if we don't have recruiting background with the federal government. So if you had a federal government question, that's not really going to be our expertise. But anytime you ask a question, if it's field related, we'll certainly let you know if we can help you with that.
That's what I was going to ask. So I would know if it makes sense.
Yeah. Diane, I guess the other way to answer your question is, regardless of whether you're going into information technology or biotech, the process to find the job is similar regardless of what.
And that's what we're here for.
You're trying to apply for, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we're here.
If you have a question about your resume, if you have a question about interviewing, and whether you're interviewing for an HR position, a biotech industry, interviewing is interviewing. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the nature of this call.
Mm-hmm. It's broad general job search advice, not really necessarily industry specific, but just in general, how to work with recruiters, interviewing, networking, salary negotiations in general. That's kind of what we're doing.
Okay, because I have a specific question. Maybe you can answer. Sure. If let's say I'll send you my resume, but if I'm going for a communication specialist role, are there certain skills you're looking for if you're looking for association?
Right. So that's a specific question that would have to do with the kind of, that's one of those we can't answer specifically, right? Even though I can talk about it broadly, but every association treats communications roles differently. Some of them are more marketing communications, some of them are more public relations, some are more editing, publishing. So that's kind of a little bit too specific for us, because that we would have to coach you directly.
Can we take it offline? Because I was just asking you before I forget.
Sure. Yeah. So feel free to send me an email. Happy to have a short call with you, and we can go from there.
But
that would be helpful.
Okay.
Diana, it would depend on the job description. So if it's a communications position, you have the job description, or it's posted, tell us what the skills are that they're looking for. And then then we might be able to give you a more specific answer.
Right.
I
And
can
unless
tell you
you
what
got
the
something-
company is. It's one company I applied to is Catholic Charities and CoStar. For CoStar, it was the content writer role, and for Catholic Charities, it was a communication specialist.
So, you know what, it's probably, I would certainly be happy to do a quick offline with you.
Right.
And then we can
I
kind
feel
of
like we
catch
need
up
to do
just-
that, but
yeah,
I was
just
just
to
trying
see
to
if your
ask you,
skills align with, and if your skills align
because
with.
I feel like we need to take it offline, but I just
That's
felt like
fine.
I needed to ask you
Yeah.
guys before I
That's fine. That's fine. So
forgot.
I'll put my email address in the chat, and
Oh, I appreciate that. Major.
You're welcome to reach out. Okay. All right. So who else? Another question for us?
I have a question.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone. It's regarding the job boards that are out there. I guess I subscribe to quite a few, and I guess I find it frustrating with some of the ones that I guess I would consider are aggregators, where it seems like it's the same company. They call themselves different names, and they aggregate things from Career Builder, Indeed, and many other ones. And when you click on them, A, the position is no longer available. B, you have to pay a premium to join the group. Maybe the position isn't available. So I just wanted to see if you had any comments or suggestions, even if there's ones that you feel perhaps, well, I don't know, aren't even relevant, that don't waste your time on.
You know, that's a great question. I'm not really familiar with the whole aggregator thing. Alki, I don't know if you have any experience with that. Do you?
I was listening, and when you mentioned that you had to pay, that jumped out at me right away. I'm not super familiar with aggregators, but I do know there's a lot of different types of job boards out there. The ones that start doing things like that, I don't necessarily call job boards anymore. That sounds a little bit more proactive. So what I kind of want to ask you the name of it, even though I don't want to ask you the name of it, but yeah, I'm not really familiar with aggregators, especially paid ones that have you pay.
What are they asking you to pay for?
Well, it's essentially a kind of a bait and switch. So I might click on one of the leads, and it seems to be legitimate, but there's another one that might be popping up along with that. So when I click on that, it says you have to join to see more information on that. And if you'd like to, I can maybe just forward one of the emails just to get your impression.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I would say, look, there shouldn't be any reason why you should have to pay to see job advertisements, period, end. I'm not sure why anybody's doing that, but I would say in general, there's absolutely no reason. The people who pay are the employers. It should be free for you. So I think maybe that's just the general rule of thumb is I wouldn't pay for any of that. Doesn't make any sense.
No, and I'm not tempted to. I guess I'm afraid to not pay attention to those because there might be that one job that's out there. But I'm pretty sure I'm probably just spinning my wheels and wasting my time.
Well, and the other thing too, Michael, speaking of the whole sectoral thing, in your particular case, since you're going after, well, primarily you're going after associations, you know that ASAE really is that's your home, right? So it's much less likely that you personally are going to find that right opportunity on a traditional job board like Indeed or any of those things, because most associations are going to post an ASAE. So I would just give that specific advice to you. So especially in your case, I wouldn't go after that. And of course, networking, right, is what we always talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I go on ASAE almost every day. Unfortunately, that the site seems to be down every time I keep clicking to check out jobs.
ASAE's job board is regularly down?
It happens quite often.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not working right now.
Gotcha.
I was going to say, and I see somebody has a question for sure. Diana has a question for sure, but I was going to say to follow up to what Shira said, you have a you have a kindred, you know, ASAE that you is your bread and butter that you would stick with for what you're looking for. And I will say too, even though they're not all great, but if it is a job board, I would say at first, and you know, you can do whatever you want to as a candidate, but stick with Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, you know, Career Builder, if it's still out there. You know, there's a few of those, but I think I get your point now. You may click on a job and then it may take you somewhere else. There are I don't want to say agencies, but there are some recruiters and some firms who have some jobs sometimes who are offering other services. There's some other companies that will tell you to click so that they can quote unquote offer you more. And I understand the temptation too, you know, hey, I've looked at this job board, there's nothing there. I want to find something new. I want to go down another, you know, find another you know, place to look that I haven't looked before. And there are some very weird ones out there, but to Shira's point, yeah, I wouldn't, outside of those main ones I named, without some research, I wouldn't click on anything, and especially if it has to pay. Right. I wouldn't.
And Shira, is CEO update still a prominent?
It absolutely is. Yeah. For Michael's level, that's also, yeah, certainly something to consider. Although I will tell you that they have recently, I just saw yesterday, they've recently bumped their rates big time. They got bought out by another company, and they've like doubled their rates. It's just really, actually, wow. They have a whole different business model now. Anyway, that's a different story. But yes, Michael, you know, certainly something to consider is going to CEO update, because they do have that senior level, you know, positions.
Yeah, I subscribe to that one too.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer Diana's question. So we're talking a little jargon, and I apologize for that. So for those of you who are not familiar with the association sector, I'll just give just a quick 101 on that. The association world, an association, the definition is a membership organization. Okay, so it's a type of nonprofit. It's not a charitable nonprofit. It's a membership association. So they're either going to represent certain industry, or they're going to represent a certain profession. So for example, the Society for Human Resource Management, their members are human resources professionals. The Public Relations Society of, that's interesting, you said PRSA. I was just saying that, yeah, the Public Relations Society of America is for PR professionals, that kind of thing.
Oh, I get you now.
Yeah, and so then there's also trade associations. So for example, the National Association of Home Builders, they're going to have like, you know, well, home builders, construction companies, those kinds of things. So so the association sector is a sector, and there are staffs. You know, associations have staff. So, you know, you could be the director of membership, or the director of communications, or the education manager, or a lobbyist, or the CEO. And so Vern, for example, he used to be an HR executive at an association. Michael has done work in education. I'm a consultant to that sector. I recruit and do other things for them. So it's its own sector, and they have these. The association sector has its own association called the American Society of Association Executives. They have a job board anyway. So that's what we were just talking about. So maybe.
Oh, now I get you, Shira.
Yeah. May not be related to your world, but that's it's own. It's its own.
So it's like different professional organizations. Yeah. Associations are professional organizations.
They have either professional members, individuals, or they have companies that are members.
It's like professional industries, like real estate, like American Realtors,
like the National Association of Realtors, NAR. Yep, that's an association.
And VAMA, Virginia Apartment Association.
Yep, those are associations. That's right.
So I've probably seen them. I didn't know they were called associations because I saw them as little parts.
Yeah, no, they're an association.
Can you please put the website for the associations?
For the overarching one, sure. It's called ASAE, and I'll put the website here.
That would be, because that's very helpful. I didn't even know they existed.
Yeah. The whole industry. Okay, so welcome, Karen. And where else you're going to have Sandy, who's coming back on here now. Shakori,
are you problems getting in?
Did you? I'm sorry about that.
It's all right. I had to kill it and start over again.
Sometimes these things happen. Shakori, are you new with us? Shakori, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. How are you?
Well, thank you. We're blessed. How are you? And
I'm good.
Yeah, how did you hear about us?
I was in last week. I was on the Zoom last week as well.
Okay, good.
So via Meetup.
Yes, good. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Do you have a job search question for us?
I don't. I'm definitely searching. I had shared last week, and I'm just here to really, enhance my knowledge.
Sure.
As one comes up, I will definitely ask.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Sandy, welcome back.
Thank you.
And is there anything you'd like to share with us, Sandy, about any of your recent job search experiences that you think might be helpful? If not, no problem, but just thought I'd put that out there in case there's people could benefit from hearing about recent experiences you've had.
Sure. Well, I do. I'll share with everybody that I shared with you via email.
I just wanted to prompt you for that to see if you were open to sharing.
Yes, I am, and it was a lessons learned for me. Sorry, I'll get on camera here in a second. I just making my coffee. That's what you hear in the background here. So yeah, I had a job opportunity through an executive recruiter forming for me, and I had gone through several interviews. I had met about 8 people in total. I completed their onboarding hiring process, which included, they just quickly put out the application and then brought it back down online. They had me go through like an assessment test, which was interesting. I haven't done that in 100 years. It was a combination of a IQ test and a personality test. And I don't do very well on those. They don't tend to reflect my, who I am very well. In case in point, the personality test said that I was an extrovert afraid to disappoint people. And I was like, nope, very wrong. Not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I'm a social introvert. I'm not shy, but I get my energy at home, and alone, I should say. They checked all my references, and that was the other thing. So here, let me put my video on so you can see me. Sorry, I'm not in the best of form, but hey, I'm respectable. I'm presentable, right? So yeah, they checked my references. They were telling me, hey, we're preparing the package for you. This is what I was told. And at the last minute, they had me meet with one more person that was not on the schedule. And this gentleman was chief strategy development person for one of their business units. So I was like, fine. I welcomed the opportunity to talk to him because I wanted to learn about what his business was all about. And this gentleman had me go through, for those of you that I haven't met, I'm a contracts executive. I lead contracts teams. I'm an attorney by background. And he wanted to walk me through an example contract and essentially asked me, according to him, he wanted to test where my commercial contracting experience levels were. So, and I have lots of commercial and government contracts experience. So I said, okay, fine. And I asked him in the beginning of the call, is this a contract that you're currently negotiating? Is it currently in process? Have you, he said, no, it's a done deal. I said, oh, okay, so you've signed it. And he said, yes, it's a done deal. And I said, okay. So he's showing me snippets of clauses, which are really hard to comment on when you don't understand the full business and you don't understand the whole context of the contract itself. But, it was a software and hardware agreement. I've seen a million of those. So I'm giving him some advice here and there, whatnot. And then as we were talking in the conversation, I said, well, since you've already signed this contract on these clauses, here's what I would do if I were you in the future. And I told him, dot. And then he said, oh, no, we haven't signed this contract yet. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Did I misunderstand you? I think you just said you did. You said it was a done deal and you'd already signed this contract. And he goes, oh, no, we haven't. This was just the template that we started from. And I'm like, okay, I'm confused, but all right, that's fine. I said, you asked me about my process and whatnot. So I was like, okay, fine. It wasn't fine. He was picking my brain for free legal advice, but it wasn't fine. But I just, said, okay. And then, So that was like a Friday a week ago. I go out on leave. I know that they had things going on that week. I was expecting to hear from them this week, which I did. It turns out that person told the president, who was the hiring manager, who would have been my manager, that you know, out of all other 7 people, he was the 8th person out of all 7 people saying she's a thumbs up, you should hire her, she's great. He said, nope, you shouldn't hire her. And the president took his word and his word alone. And I got an automated Dear Jane letter. And that was it. I was like, I've been interviewing with these people since July. And I've been entertaining other opportunities and interviewing with other companies, but you know, that one was the furthest along, and I really was intrigued by them, and it was a big challenge. I knew that they had a lot of they were very behind the times in their processes, and their maturity model was very it was not as advanced as the company I came from. So I could bring them to a more, you know, current time and a maturity model. And they were excited about that. And then when I got this Dear Jane letter, I was like, what? Okay. So the moral of my story for all of you, if there is one, I mean, I wasn't putting all my eggs in one basket, and I wasn't counting my chickens, nor was I counting my chickens and my eggs at the same time. But the moral of the story is, I guess it isn't done until it's done. And I knew that, but it was just like, I was surprised. It was really it was a gut punch to me. It was a real gut punch going through all of that. And then having them call my references. And I'm very guarded. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very guarded over my references, because these are very busy people. And I don't want some company calling them and spending 30 to 45 minutes of their time each. And I gave them 4. They required me to give them references for not only my last job, but 2 jobs back. And I gave them references from each one of those jobs that, you know, they're wasting their time too. So I was a little taken aback by that. So I guess, you know, that's my kind of my story. I was just
these things happen, and I know you feel like you dodged a bullet a little bit. And you know,
I did.
Vern, I know you've been obviously on that side of things because you used to be an HR executive. Do you have any thoughts on Sandy's experience?
Oh, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is what I often say about the job search. It's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, if you listen to Sandy, all of the effort and all of the time she put into this, and getting to the point where she felt she was going to be, the choice, and then the company turns around and, pulls the rug out from underneath her.
And I was told that. I was actually told that you are the only candidate. We want you.
Yeah,
in the company, both in the company and the executive recruiting office, and including the president. He's like, this is great. We think you could fill everything that we need done. And they were giving me all the accolades and impression that they were going to push out an offer to me.
Yeah. Well, and so the other thing that comes to my mind, and this is something as a job seeker, you just don't know enough about the internal culture and the internal relationships that are happening in that organization, that you're, maybe the person that interviewed you and picking your brain for legal advice felt threatened by you. And maybe he made this big pitch to the president. Who knows? I'm making things up now. I don't know.
That came to mind, I think, because I called him on his own, what he was doing. I called him on his intention and real intention. And I think he might, that thought totally crossed my mind. I was like, did this guy think I wasn't, I don't know, manipulatable? And I'm not, I'm pretty much a straight shooter, and I can see through people's BS.
Yeah. And so there's, again, when those kind of, 180s happen in the job search process, it's hard for anybody to know exactly what went on, internally, but they happen. It's just not, it's another, kind of unfair thing that happens to job seekers as you go through this whole process.
And yet it actually, to your point, Sandy, I know, because you've emailed me about this, but it could be a reflection of of things that are happening internally that maybe would not have been the right fit for you.
Right, yeah,
And-
that's,
and-
yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
fact, I just completed an executive search where it was down to 2 candidates. And look, both candidates went through a very rigorous process, presentations, all this stuff, came right down to the end. It took a while for the search committee to make the decision. And at the end of the day, they made the decision over one candidate because that one candidate had some very specialized fundraising relationships that was going to, help the organization move forward really quickly. Why am I mentioning that? Because I found out right at the end of the process, okay, after the 2 finalist candidates had given their presentations, they went away and then there was a discussion, right, with the search committee. We were told right there in that meeting that all of a sudden they were going to be having to cut $400,000 from their budget.
Oh gosh.
And that's the reason why they wanted to go with candidate number 1, because candidate number 1 was going to be able to hopefully bring in money very quickly. So when all was said and done, and I had to let down candidate number 2 and then actually share with candidate number 2, by the way, this is the reasons, the only reason why they hired the other person. And it's because of this. Deborah, she goes, basically, I'm glad I wasn't hired. Right?
That's a rough thing, Shira. Fundraising is so hard that I'd rather call every newspaper. I told my one time an executive, I'd rather be eaten by the media than fundraise.
Well,
it's the hardest thing.
This other person
Give
actually,
people for money, yeah.
but the other person was actually very fine with fundraising, but didn't necessarily want to step into a situation where there was a $400,000 deficit, right?
It's rough fundraising.
But the point is, you just don't know. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And so it could be that, Sandy, right, to your point, this just wasn't the right opportunity for you. And you just found out right at the last minute.
Right at the last minute. And that's, we talked about that via email, Tira, but something didn't sit right in my spirit when I went through that interview process. The last 2, the first, so I had only been meeting with the president, the chairman of the board, and then I met with his executive team, the rest of his board members, which was his CFO, CIO, VP of HR, and the executive VP of one of his business units. And the EVP of one of the business units didn't stay on for long. He had another call to go to, and the other 3, I got a strange vibe from them. I felt like there was a whole lot of complacency in this company. There were people that had been there for their entire careers, for 20 plus years. And, the company's pretty old. It's about 55 years old. It's been around for a minute, but their revenues don't track with their age. That's for sure. And they were looking to double in size. And when I asked the CFO, who's a head of that initiative, how do you intend on doubling in size? And, I said, is it through M&A act? Is it organic? And if it's organic, and not M&A, then what's the plan to grow it organic? And he could not answer that question. Either did not, would not, or could not. And I got the sense he could not. So I was like, okay, is there a strategy? What's your strategy? Couldn't answer that question. So I was like, okay, there's and there was a lot of change that needed to be done in the contracts department. They had no means of tracking contracts. They had put all their contracts in a network file. So you had no way of pulling data out of the contracts to see how you're doing. They had no way of tracking workload, no metrics, none of that. So it was going to be a really, really big job to bring them into the 21st century.
Sandy, you're bringing up some really interesting points here. I want to extrapolate for the rest of the team here and share this thought. Okay. So you're a very thoughtful job seeker, right? We know this about you, right? So you ask the right questions, right? You're inquisitive, you're doing your due diligence. What I would suggest is that not every job seeker comes into an interview with that lens. There are a lot of job seekers, and I know Alki and Vern and I can all attest to this, that come into an interview with the sense of, I just want to answer the questions in the right way. Just give me the offer, okay? Almost a subservient kind of role, like, I'm here to put my hands in my lap, answer your questions, go get the job. You are the other side of this equation. You need to make sure that this job is right for you just as much as they need to make sure that you are right for them. You want to go in with these interviews with confidence. Even if you have been in long-term job search transition, I know that you got to put food on the table. I very much appreciate that. What you don't want to do, though, is get into a role and 3 months later, you're back looking because it was just not the right fit. You want to make sure that you're asking thoughtful, questions, right? Just like Sandy was talking about, whatever that means for you. So in Sandy's world, it's a whole other thing because she's in contracts and risk management and whatever. For you, it might be something completely different. Really be thinking about culture fit, how they do their work, their strategies. What does success look like for you in this role? What are their expectations of you? All of the things that are important to you that you know from your past experience, what's going to be a good fit and not. No. Are there always risks? Of course. Is there any perfect place? Of course not. But you can do your best to ask good, thoughtful questions throughout the process. First level interview, second level, third level, all the way through. Every person that you talk to, you make sure that you're asking the right questions to make sure you're making a good decision. Now, the other benefit of asking good questions is that they see how you think. Okay. So you want to ask questions that are very, very strategic as well. Even if you're at an entry level, it doesn't matter. You can still be thinking strategically. You can still be asking about how your role relates to the mission and vision of the organization, to their goals and objectives, right? So I'm being very broad about how I'm explaining this, but my point here is you need to ask good, thoughtful questions, not just them of you of them, right? To help you make a good decision.
Sure. Can I ask a question or share an experience or a bit of both-ish?
Sure.
I was at a job on a college jam event, and I wanted to talk to some companies that I applied and got a nice letter from that we don't want to get. The rejection letter.
Mm-hmm.
I asked one company, so can you please tell me what the job means? Because the way I read the job meant something different than when they explained it to me. I'm like, wait a second. So it's a brand ambassador, not what I was seeing, because sometimes they say the word marketing. I had to ask a company yesterday, when you're saying marketing, am I hearing marketing coordinator where you're doing strategy, or am I hearing a salesperson? They're like, oh, it's a sales job. I'm like, I was probably drinking too much on Kool-Aid. Because that could mean marketing can mean everything. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And community relations can mean what I heard the job meant was you're out in the community, you're trying to bring brand name recognition. They're like, wow, it's a low level job. You had too much stuff. I'm like,
so Diana, let me just address that for a quick second, because that's another important point. And Karen, I do see your hand. So when job descriptions are written, they are not necessarily written in a way that accurately reflects what the job is. And that's for a lot of reasons. And I'm not judging companies for doing that. Sometimes they literally just don't know what to say. The title might be misleading. The job description might not be written out.
Yes.
And people mean different things. So for example, the classic example in the sales world, for example, I know you're talking about marketing, but as a parallel, does somebody call something a business development manager, for example? Business development sometimes means sales, sometimes means relationship building, sometimes means whatever. So as a recruiter, and I'm sure Alki and Vern have done this too, sometimes we try to help the hiring manager title the job appropriately, because sometimes it can be inadvertently misleading to the candidate when you see one thing and it actually means something else. It just may mean they don't know how to title it. It may mean that they don't really know how to write the description in a thoughtful way, which is why you ask the good questions. So
I actually had to ask them and seek them on. Like, I applied. I just want to understand, did I do something wrong? She's like, you probably. I'm like, well, I'm a communications person, PR, trying to be a greatest PR person. She's like, oh, no, we don't need that. Media relations, celebrity. She's like, oh, no. We're trying to, and you're not pet. I'm like, I'm a business C kind of person. For another company that I read the job description and see what skills we asked. I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. Sometimes it's good to seek them out, even if it's not the right one. I'm like, oh, so you mean a brand ambassador? That's not what I was looking for.
Right. And that's why you have to ask the good questions, because it can mean all kinds of things, especially.
What if you don't even get to the interview? My mom looked at it and she's like, wow, it doesn't say what you do. I'm like, so I probably was seeing what I wanted to see. Because I remember asking.
And Diana, that actually happens too. And I'll make one more comment, and then Karen, I'd love to hear your question. So my last comment is this. So I have a concept that I call bullet number 5 syndrome. What does that mean? What I mean by that is that a lot of job seekers will look at a job description. This is human nature. This is not about you, Diana. Like most everybody does this. People will look at a job description and see what they want to see. We kind of fixate, the psychologists will call it selective perception. We selectively perceive the thing about that job that's right for us. I call it bullet number 5. We focus on bullet number 5. That's my job. Forgetting about everything else, not seeing the qualification section, not seeing all the rest of the bullets. Our eyes tend to gloss over everything, and we see the aspect of the job that we think is right for us. But the reality is, if you look at it in totality, and really analyze it, sometimes we can see things from a different lens and not just because we think, oh, this is just the right job for me. So I just want
It felt interesting. And I was like, well, community relations. And they're like, it's a brand ambassador. I'm like, oh, so you mean, they're like, you have too much and we don't need all that. I'm like,
yeah.
Or sometimes you see companies that you're like, oh my gosh, you guys, I know you guys don't have a position. If I can only be coached by you. He's like, well, I'll see if there's any coaching. Because sometimes you ask to get their card, or companies, because I know I was talking to a company yesterday. I was like, well, I've heard some things that I would share, because sometimes you might have valuable stuff from 2 people that's equal to hundreds.
So hopefully that's helpful. And I want to make sure we're getting to Karen's question as well. So hopefully
Sure.
Karen?
Yeah, I did have a comment for maybe Sandy. I mean, it sounds to me that the last 2 people you talked to for the company just weren't at the same place where they probably should have been. I've been in interviews before where they've let you know that you have the job, and then all of a sudden something happens and they never talk to you again. It's just really weird. Being a job seeker sometimes is just a terrible place to be in, because even though you want to be in control, you're really not. And when you started probably talking about the contracts, and when he said that one was a done deal and then it wasn't, I would have had a huge black hole in my thought process over the whole thing.
Well, that guy did throw me. He was the one that threw me for the loop as far as I have to let me take a step back. Sherry, you had mentioned, like, asking questions that are important to you. One of the questions that are one of the things I need to know about an organization that's really important to me is culture and management style and leadership, more leadership style by the executive team. So I need to know that the workplace isn't toxic. Okay. I've been in enough toxic workplaces where I'm really doing my best to try to avoid that. I don't work well in a environment that's highly political, where you have to butter up the leadership to get your way and things like that. And I'm just not, that's not my style. I don't roll that way. So, sorry, I put my camera off so I can get up. So for me, when that person said what he said and did, and by the way, I sent him a thank you note, and he responded back very kindly and said, thank you for your kind words. I enjoyed meeting you. And that was it. It was nothing more than that. But but I was like, and I don't read into those kind of things. But my gut feeling after that interview and the interview prior to that, when I was meeting like their CFO and CIO and VP of HR, I just got this vibe off of them that, they're like, we're not going to change. We're going to continue doing business the way we do it, but we're going to expect to grow. And it's like, how? And that's why I started asking those kind of questions. And so when I walked away from it, I was like, well, I do need an income.
But but you're looking to be probably more of a change leader than what they were
was exactly. And and I had mentioned this when I talked to the president again. It was right before that interview with the CIO and the CFO and whatnot. And that was in person, by the way. I went to their office. Well, all of it had been in person. But anyways, I specifically asked him, I said, you have a lot of changes that need to happen. How is your leadership team embracing the fact that a lot of change needs to occur? And he didn't really answer it. He goes, oh, well, they're fine with it. I'm like, really? But what are they? Well, tell me, how are they fine with it? I mean, how are you communicating? You're the leader, you're the president. So how are you communicating what needs to be done? And he really couldn't answer the question. So I was just like, there's, things that make you go, And that was one of the things. So then my gut started talking to me, or the good Lord probably was talking to me more than anything else, saying, hold the phone here. Just hang on.
Right. Yeah. Alki, did you have a thought on this? It sounds like you do.
I got about 7,000, but I'm going to just stick to one.
We'll take 2. How about that?
So I thought initially when you started, you said they took you through the onboarding process. That was probably just a verbiage thing, because I was like, wait a minute, were you hired? And then it was pulled back, and I've seen that happen as well. But yeah, when I'm just going to say a lie, it could have, I've seen that process happen before, and I'm sure you have too, being an expert in your field, where somebody, like Shira mentioned earlier with fundraising too, somebody's trying to get your process. And there's a lot of recruiting that we don't do that or allow that. I try to protect candidates when I can too, if somebody's asking for samples or certain things, to make sure that there's either some form of a release or it's just a sample and not being used. But I'm going to call it a lie. When you ask him a question, and to me, that was a lie, unless it was just
a lie.
Some type of mistake. So you talk about, that black, you talk about black holes or feelings that you get. Going back to what Shira was saying, I always tell candidates, it's a two-way conversation, and you're interviewing them as well. And that control that was just mentioned, candidates, and I understand, needing a job and needing to pay the bills too, but honestly, candidates are in control and can be in control just as much as the company is. They're asking you questions. Hiring managers all the time are listening to red flags. I don't really like that term that much because it's such a cliche, but they're listening for flags. So are you. And it sounds like you got a couple in that call. I heard at least three questions that you asked with weird answers. And it doesn't always mean that the company is not great, but you should definitely be listening. And that's your control, because it is a two-way interview. It's a conversation, unless you do go like Shira said, and you're like, I don't care what they say, I'm taking this job because I need it. And you just listen and then you answer all the questions. But the approach that I tell candidates all the time is, you have questions too. Make sure you put together at least 2 to 3 great questions, or just ask all of the questions that come to your mind, even if it's offline, because those questions can make or break, what you're going to be doing to yourself for the next 4 years, 5 years, 40, 50 hours a week and things of that nature. So,
and I would also jump springboard off of that in terms of not just the questions that you're asking, but who are you asking the questions to? The people who are going to be really in your circle, whether it's your direct supervisor or the colleagues that are right around you, how they answer those questions are going to matter more than, for example, the human resources professional. Nothing wrong with HR people, but HR people, unless you're actually working in the HR department, aren't necessarily going to be in your world every day, right? So just be thoughtful about who's actually responding to you, whose opinion matters most. And if it is, and Sandy, in that case, I don't know who that person would have been to you, if that would have just been an indirect supervisor or a colleague or what have you. I don't need to know the specifics, but the idea is, who that person is matters. Put more emphasis on the people who are going to be in your immediate sphere, maybe less so the people who are maybe in other departments or are in, HR, where it just doesn't matter as much in terms of your day-to-day experience. Don't put equal weight, right?
Right. No, I customize my questions to whom I'm meeting, so if I'm meeting with, say this gentleman I was talking with, who had me review a contract out of context, I asked, and by the way, he didn't want to afford me any time to ask him questions. That was another red flag, not to use the cliche words there, but it was concerning. And I said, hey, do you have a few extra minutes for me to ask some questions here? And he goes, oh, sure. So I asked him, but, I was prepared to ask him about his business and how he conducted it and what kind of support he needed from the department and some more background. They had just let go their VP of contracts because this person it wasn't working out for them. So he was the type of person that was just, kind of a bottleneck and had to review everything and was just, they were asking him to do more. It sounded to me they were asking him to do more than maybe his skill set afforded. So, when they were interviewing me, I was prepared to answer those types of questions. I had that insight from the executive recruiter, which was helpful. But with that being said, I mean, some of the other questions from the other teams that I was meeting. And oh, by the way, I did meet with the director of contracts, who would have been my direct report. And that was a very productive conversation, because that's where I really got true insight as to what was happening in that group, but in the entire company. It's just really important that, everyone, you keep in mind that you're interviewing them as well, like everybody is saying. And and also that, you know, their processes, every company is different. For me, it's been the first time in over 5 years that I've interviewed with the company. So when they start doing things like sending me forms to to onboard me, that's what I mean. They were putting me literally through the onboarding process. I had to complete stuff for security background clearances, checks, and I had to go through, you know, they were sending me their HR stuff, and, you know, and asking me what benefits I'd want to choose. And, you know, there were some other things that, you know, with my last job, that would have been a part of the onboarding. That would have not have been a part of the interview. Okay. So, and plus they were telling me we're preparing an offer for you. So, I mean, you know, it's just odd that they, you know, based upon one person's feedback out of a total of 8, the president decided to go with this guy's input. And I'm like, well, what was telling to me was that president was unsure and lacked confidence. And by the way, he's new to his seat, but he's been with the company for 20 some odd years, but he's fairly new, like within the last year, to being the president of the entire organization, the entire company. So that tells me he wasn't very confident in his decision-making alone. And that scares me. You're the president of this company. You better know what you're doing, and you better be confident. You better be willing to say, you know what, I've got input from 7 other people saying that she's outstanding. I've met her twice myself, 3 times, if you want to count the couple of phone calls that we had, or one phone call we had. So I appreciate your input. We're going to move forward. If that was me in his chair, I would have done that. So, you know, the fact that, you know, he takes one person's opinion out of 7 and decides to go the different direction, that just blows my mind. And by the way, the executive recruiter I was working with, she refuses to work with him anymore. She said, I fired him. I can't, you know, I don't want to put my candidates are just as important as my company's. And I just can't in good conscience work with them if they do what they do and what they just did. I can't give them another candidate. They approached her and said, okay, well, we need you to get us source somebody else. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. You had a great candidate. You blew it. I was like, wow. Okay. That's impressive. But
couple of comments from an HR standpoint. I have no idea why they would be giving you information on the security clearance stuff before you're actually signed an offer letter, right? I mean, so there's a process that's, you know, the HR function doesn't look like it's got any better processes than the rest of the organization. I mean,
right, what does that tell you?
Yeah. What does that tell you? And then secondly, to the point Shira made earlier, again, the better HR departments, at least when I was recruiting, I wanted the recruiters who worked for me to understand the job as much as possible, meet with the hiring manager, you know, before we even start to, you know, interview people or source people. Let us understand as much as we can. Now, we're not going to understand the nuts and bolts of every single job down to dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but help HR be as intelligent as possible so that as we're going through the kind of the upfront screening process, we can do the best job to really, you know, end up with the best quality candidates. And then the third thing, we talked about questions you should ask. One of the best questions that I encourage everybody to ask in every interview they have, especially with the hiring manager, is what does success look like in this job? You know, if you were to hire me and 6 months from now, you said I was doing, you know, wow, this is, you know, you're one of the best people that we've ever had in this role. What would cause you to say that? And then listen very carefully and if they don't have a really good answer, if they don't have some concrete answers, that's another red flag. Okay. If they can say, well, here's the 3 key objectives that we'd expect you to accomplish, and here's how we're, you know, we need to talk about how we'll measure them, but here's what this role needs to do. And then you've got some degree of confidence that you're talking to somebody who's being honest with you, and if it's everything else falls into place, then it you know, might be the right job for you.
Yeah, that they thought it through. I did ask a very similar question to that effect, Vern, of what kind of support, what did they need from me? in this role. I understand what you had before. That didn't work for you. What does work for you?
Yeah.
And, you know, and then they were things like, they asked me things like, or they stated things like, well, we know we need to make sure that, you know, you're responsive and that things are business is getting done. And that's like, of course, you know, and like I said, the prior person was a bottleneck, had to read everything. They missed deadlines as a result of that. So that was pretty concerning when I heard that the internal customers were getting such poor service. To me, that was a flag that said, okay, these folks are going to be disgruntled towards anybody new coming in the door. They're going to be, well, let's see. Yeah, we'll see what you can do. And I've walked into environments like that. I mean, this is not unusual for contracts. I mean, contracts, sadly, some leaderships give the impression that, you know, we're the no department. We're going to tell you no. And I have a different philosophy. It's like, we're going to find the path that's, you know, a good path that is within our corporate risk thresholds. We're going to try to find our way to yes. And I train my folks that work for me to think that way versus you can't do that. I mean, we're an overhead department. We need sales coming in the door to pay our own salaries. So we need to find the way to do that. So
something else that triggers for me, Sandy, is this whole idea of when a person comes into a job, how much change is the organization willing to accept, and how much change do you want to affect, right? And that's at any level. I don't care. You can be entry level, you can be senior level, but it's people are gonna walk into some messier situations and some less messy situations. What's your own threshold? What are you willing to accept? You know, sometimes
that's a good question, Shira.
Because sometimes we come into an organization and it's a big hot mess. Now, some people look at that situation and go, let me at it, right? I'm a change leader. I'm all about this. I'm a fixer upper. And some people love that and some people don't. And there's no right or wrong to this. It has to do with your own constitution and what you are willing to and ready, frankly, to accept in terms of the level of mess in the organization. Some people want to come in and have everything sort of be glassy and smooth, and that's fine too. But you've got to look at yourself and say, what kind of change am I willing to tolerate? Am I willing to help with? And if it's very, very messy and that's not your jam, you've got to know that. You've got to know that's not going to be what you're going to accept. And if you're okay with it, and if you're really just a, you know, kind of a change leader, and that's what you do, then that's fine too. But you've got to have that lens to know in advance how much change you're willing to tolerate, and then of course how much change they're willing to accept.
That's a good point, Shira.
Yeah. Absolutely. I actually asked the question of how well does the culture embrace change? And that's a pretty wide open question. And when they say, well, they're okay with it. Okay, then you dig more. Okay, well, tell me about a recent large change that you made and how it was communicated and what was the response. And, you know, the response at that from the president of this company, they decided to move their locations from one to another. And it hasn't taken effect yet. It'll take effect early next year, but and he told everybody in a town hall meeting and no one knew about it. He had kept that process close to his vest and then just released it out to everybody. And he got a lot of, you know, backlash as a result. And he seemed a little like upset about that. And I said, well, I asked him, I said, did you ever communicate that before? And he goes, no, we had just settled the leases and you know, and then I told everybody. I didn't want to tell him until the leases were settled. And I said, so there wasn't a prompting at all, like, hey, we're thinking about moving locations and we're scouting out certain areas and here's where we're scouting out. And he goes, no. And I go, okay, well, people don't embrace change. Not everybody embraces change. And so, because the majority of the people were on board, but not everybody embraces change. And you got to communicate early, often, and consistently.
So I'd like to share something with you guys. I wouldn't normally bring this into this kind of conversation because normally we're just talking about job search, but since we're into the corporate culture thing, I just want to take 30 seconds and share my screen and share with you guys a model. Actually, my husband did his doctorate on this model. So that's kind of how I learned it. It's called the Competing Values Framework, and it has to do with organizational culture. And basically every corporate culture is kind of like a personality. And so there are these 4 different kinds of corporate cultures where there's competing values. And it all has to do with how stable the organization is, how hierarchical it is, how externally focused, internally focused it is. And so when you look at some companies, in fact, I would say nonprofits tend to fit into this, what's called the clan culture, very sort of stable, mentoring, nurturing, collaborative, participatory, sort of kind of a harmony oriented kind of a thing. So they're internally focused on their people, and they do have flexibility, but it's all around internal. Hierarchical, government tends to be very much that way, highly structured, all about control and efficiency, very, very stable, not really tend not to be very innovative or change oriented, but tends to be very grounded. Adhocracy, classic example would be like a high-tech company, always dynamic, risk-taking, externally focused, change all the time. And then market is more stable, like Amazon, that kind of a big company, stable, very results-oriented, very externally focused, competitive, right? And so companies will actually have competing values. They'll be one way, but they may want to turn into something else. And that's where the change conflict happens. I'm only mentioning this because if you think you're willing to, you're welcome to take a picture of this if you like.
Can I ask a question, Shira?
Give me one sec, Diana. Let me just finish one
Okay.
more. So when you're thinking about internal culture, this could be a lens through which you look to say, what kind of culture is right for you? Are you looking for culture that's more clan, more adhocracy, what have you? And be thinking about where is the organization going and how do you align with them, right? Not just how do they align with you. So I just wanted to share this with you as just another lens you can look at when you're asking questions. Yeah, Diana?
Can a clan be results oriented for certain tasks?
Well, it depends. Then that's where the competing values, and they could have a primarily a clan culture, but they could be wanting to be adhocracy or wanting to be something more externally focused. There's probably going to be tension with that. So they can be results oriented. Maybe it's kind of like with personalities. No person's just one thing, right? You kind of have different dynamics, and maybe they're part clan and part adhocracy. You're going to find some tension, but yes, they certainly can be results oriented.
Because what I'm trying to say is when I did an internship in a healthcare place, they had results. These charts have to be done this way. Like I know some companies, things have to be at this level. If it's not at this level, we'll take people out.
Yeah.
Because I've asked a company before, so this is what I'm walking into. She's like, yes. Because because that's why I'm asking, because a nonprofit can be result oriented.
It absolutely can be results oriented.
And they can have controls. This is how things are done in the field. And this is what we need you to achieve.
That's right.
And I'm saying with certain companies, I ask questions sometimes. So this is what I'm walking into, because I have to know if I'm willing to, if I can deliver that. Because sometimes
they're going to lead, their culture is going to have more of a heavier feel toward one or the other, but they're going to probably exhibit other pieces as well.
That's what I was trying to ask you, because I was trying to think, if you're a nonprofit, you still care about structure. You'd have a way of, okay, if you're fundraising, we have a goal, we need to raise $1 million. If we didn't raise a goal, what's up?
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there just as another lens, right, as you're thinking about good culture fit. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? Vern, did you have something to share?
Let me share one last thought about what you just showed. The last association I worked for was a major trade association in Washington, D.C. It was very much like a clan. There was a lot of structure to it, a lot of hierarchy. The recruiter was a former boss of mine, and she was recruiting for the job because she'd been doing executive coaching within the company for the last 3 or 4 years. So she knew the company pretty well. And she told me, she said, Vern, it is really conservative. And their HR function is really in the 20th century. And so I knew what I was walking into in terms of there needed to be lots of change, but the change, it was going to take a lot of time. And so in the 4 or 5 years that I was there, I implemented a lot of the changes that I knew, but some of the changes I identified within the first 12 months, the VP of HR who followed me implemented a compensation plan that I had said they needed, 5 years earlier. And in the first 12 months, I said, we should survey for the best place to work in Washington. No, now we're not doing that. And now that company, the VP after the VP. They now are one of the best places to work in Washington, D.C. But that's how long it took to implement some of those changes because of the way the culture was. And, and so if you were really a change driver and you got in there and you tried to do all this at once, you would have failed. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with where their priorities are and where their funding comes from. And,
yeah.
Right? And are they relying on last year's budget, or are they going for next the client tomorrow? So
yeah.
Anyway, so we've had a kind of a rich conversation today. Any other last minute questions before we wrap up?
I just want to second everything that you've kind of come back and said. I can tell that you're thorough, Sandy, and that comes from your work and your experience in your career too. What Shira just shared about culture and company, and I've heard a lot about lenses today. It just made me think of the fact that, there's jobs and then there's opportunities. Jobs, some people like to say you can go out and find one anywhere. You can just go get a job and get the bills paid. And then you can think of opportunities. And even though they both can be similar, to me, when you start thinking about an opportunity, you think about all these things. You think about culture. You think about, what's the fit? Is it going to work for me? Do they listen? Do they answer questions honestly? Like that's the approach. If you just want a job, yeah, you can just throw a resume out anywhere. You can just grab a job. You can go through the interview process and hopefully they hire you. But not all opportunities are gonna work for you. And I listen as a recruiter when I talk to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of candidates to those one or two things that tell me, that's a no, or that's a maybe, or I want to talk to that person more. It's the same thing as a candidate. When you go in, a lot of times you're not gonna get the job. You're not gonna get the opportunity, but the mindset should be, I'm going in to ask questions and listen for those things that let me know, is this a clan? I fit with clans? Is the hierarchy structure? That tells me a lot about how they work. Those are the things that you're listening for, because it's a journey along this process. And I apologize too that they took you through that long process. I was going to ask you, you don't have to answer. It sounded like you said you were working with an external recruiter. Whenever you work with us, like, hopefully we can help you along the way too, by answering a lot of those questions before you find yourself in like 19 meetings where you and I can go back and forth over things as an external recruiter. And then we might discover, this isn't the right opportunity for you. Or if you do talk to that guy, I can tell you, he's gonna do X, Y, Z. So it's definitely a process, which I know I've been on 3 of these calls so far. I already know Shira, and I've learned a lot about Vern. We see this all the time, but we look at it as more than just clicking on a job board and do I find the right job. It's an intensive process to find that home. And I wish you the best as you move on from that opportunity.
Thank you so much. And the executive recruiter, she and I had, yes, I did get, she brought the opportunity to me. And she was very good about explaining the process, because I was asking her those questions. Okay, what's next? What's next? Tell me their entire process. What's their onboarding? And, she's like, don't worry about it. It's not too complicated. Here's what they do. And she was in constant contact with their VP of HR to kind of go through it and get my questions answered. So, what they told her, what they told me, the company directly, they aligned. And it's just that at the end of the day, the president of this company decided to take one person's word over everybody else's. And that's telling to me. That tells me, like I said earlier, he doesn't have the confidence to do the hard work. And I don't want to work for somebody like that, frankly. But thank you.
Well, this is good to have a deep dive today. We don't normally get to do this, to sort of flesh out one opportunity and extract all the juice out of it. So
it's good to learn, even if you're like, I'm gonna make a comment here if that's okay. I may not understand contracts because I'm not a contracts person, but some stuff you can understand even if you're not understand contracts, what to put on your warning list.
That's right. I think there's always good lessons to be learned from all of our stories. So anyway. All right. So
you need to learn lessons from everything. Sometimes you have gut instincts.
That's right. We gotta always be on the learning journey. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the call now. So I do offer a short prayer call for those who want to stay on the line. And otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing folks next week. All right.
Can we still go to your website, Shira?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll put my website in the chat here for those who are interested in that. So it's purposefulhire.com. And then all of these recordings are in the upper right-hand corner of my website called Hire Moment Mastermind. And you'll see the recordings from since we've been doing this since August of 2020.
That's a long time.
Yeah, we did a long time.